Aisha, thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks for having me.
For answering my call.
I was always going to answer your call. Fellow Bristolian, I've got to be here.
Oh, I'll take that. I was just saying to you as you were walking up the steps, I remember contacting you a long time ago. I've never met you in person. I contacted you a long time ago, and I'm sure you're not going to remember, but that was the first time we met. So I don't need to ask you really that question.
You already remember.
Yeah. But yeah, it'd be great to talk to you today. A lot about education, representation. But first of all, I want to find about you.
Oh.
So, on that note, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up for you and your community? Positives, negatives, however you want to tell that story.
Yeah. It's so interesting when I think about the word community, because when you're in it, you don't really know you're part of a community. If you haven't left your city, if you haven't left the country, it's all you know and your proximity. And I would say probably from 0 to 11, I grew up in Easton. It was really multicultural. I went to the local church. I had, both my mum and my dad's side of the family. It was nice. It was cool. Then my mum decided to ship me out. And what I mean by that is...
I was going to say, what's that mean?
She decided to send me to a school in South Gloucestershire.
Wow.
So, yeah. So then,
But was that with a... Well,
that was with an intention. My mum felt at the time that actually, schools in the local area were not doing as well. Yeah. She felt, being around my friends was not going to be the best for my educational attainment. And so she decided that she wanted to send me to what at the time was John Cabot, CTC. It was the first technological college they introduced. And it was a shift. So all of a sudden now I have to get on a coach at like 6:45, 7 a.m. in the morning, and I'm having to go to this school, and all of a sudden I realize I look different. And what I mean by that is most people around me are now racialized as white.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so where am I and what is this?
That must have been a bit of a shock.
It was a culture shock that I didn't know was coming, and it wasn't explained. It wasn't tempered. It wasn't understood.
Did your mum say that this could be happening? Because she obviously looked out for this school, I'm guessing thinking that it might be, better in some ways for education. But did she mention at any point?
No.
The likelihood is the demographic's going to be a lot different. She did no preparation.
She did no tempering.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, even though we are still Bristolians, our accents are different.
Yeah.
Our colloquial terms are different. We eat differently. We enjoy different things. And all of a sudden, I'm living in this state of double consciousness, because I'm one person when I'm in Easton and I'm someone else when I'm in South Gloss. And I never really felt rooted in either location. And I just felt like I was just floating between different versions of myself. And that really began what I felt was actually a bit of an identity crisis.
Okay.
And not really knowing who I was as a young person, who I should have been. And that really, if I'm honest, completely changed the trajectory of my life. And actually why I'm here today doing what I do. I really had to hold the mirror to myself over the years. And whilst I look back and people go, schools were, should have been the best days of your life. If I'm honest, mine weren't.
Why? Well, I mean, obviously say what you want to say. But
I think it's not knowing who you are, but I was also steeped into some serious racism, and I didn't know it was racism. And you become accustomed and acclimatized to certain behaviors. You start going along with the jokes and that what was called banter. And you're kind of tone policing and assimilating. I wanted to be like all of my friends who are mostly white girls. I wanted my hair straight. I wanted to be as pretty as them. I wanted to hang out where they hung out. And little things like, at school, you want a boyfriend. Nobody wants the black girl. And it's that I didn't realize how much those things were chipping away at me. At the time, I had no language for it. I had no understanding of what it was. And you start to hear stereotypes. So teachers would say things like, here comes trouble when I'm walking down the corridor. I've not done anything. But you're not realizing these little kind of microaggressions and subtleties. And I had no idea what any of this meant. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough. It just was not a place I wanted to be. And so I felt like I rushed my childhood. And I was trying so hard to then fit into the community. So then when I came back to Easton and St. Paul's, where the community resided, I wanted to be a part of that as much as I could.
And do you think you were trying maybe too hard with that because you were having to try and act a certain way to fit in there? Then you're back in Easton or whatever.
And it just wasn't working. just really wasn't working. And I just felt quite socially isolated. And you kind of end up growing up a bit of a loner, not really having any friends in any space and not ever really feeling connected.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, just out of interest, are you still connected with any of your people that you went to school with?
A few, but nobody I would say that, I've really continued a lifelong friendship with. I mean, one or two people still friends with. One, I became the godmother of her children. But, we're talking about like one or two people out of over 150 people in your year group. I just didn't continue. And, you do a bit of Facebook reviewing and you're seeing where people are at every now and again.
Stalking.
Yeah, I'm not going to call it stalking, but I'm going to call it reviewing, assessing where people are at. And a lot of them stayed friends. A lot of the girls kept their groups. I guess
they were local to the school as well. There's quite a lot in this.
Yes, it was deep and it was layered and it was complex. But I think my mum had good intentions. So on the one hand, did I achieve academically as a result of her decision? Yes. So from her perspective, go, done.
Has she taken it on board that actually the impact, emotionally?
She gets it. She understands, but she felt it was a necessary sacrifice. She said she wouldn't change the decision because I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had those educational opportunities.
Would you change? Would have you changed the situation? Decision?
It's such you're putting me in a difficult situation. Well, honestly, in all honesty, I would.
Wow, okay.
I would because I feel such a disconnection now with my racialized identity. And I find myself really grappling with what does it mean to be racialized as Black? What does it mean to be connected with your community? And I still, even at the age of 40, don't know anymore. And I look at my brother who went to a local school and he is so connected. He understands the music, the food, the culture. And I almost feel like I am in a glass kind of box and I can see it and I'm banging on the window going, let me experience it, let me immerse. Yeah. So I can see it, but I don't feel like I'm a part of it. Yeah. And that is a hard consciousness to grapple with.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the fact that you understand that and you kind of, you're looking at on, you can tell this has obviously been part of your journey.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, do you know what comes through for me when I hear this? I was like, wow, this must mean that experience is meant that you can operate in different places, different spaces.
There's a currency.
So like, I'm thinking there's a bit of a superpower in this.
That's how my mum sees it.
But when it comes down to how you feel as a person about that experience and what you've just explained then, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot to grapple with.
Yeah, that kind of embodiment of it is very different to the currency and I can converse with the best. I can sit with a CEO, in a C-suite office and have a conversation and be able to kind of articulate myself and impress them. And I can also go into the community and grapple and have connections from a grassroots level. But I always feel
you don't know where you feel like you exist.
Yeah, who is Aisha in all of that? I'm constantly having to grapple with that question.
You're a little bit of all of it.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I'll absolutely guarantee you there's a lot of people that are rooted in whatever of those different situations you're talking about would love to be a bit more like a butterfly and to be able to kind of, not invent themselves, but to be able to deal with different situations in different spaces and places. I mean, what is it for me to say? But I seriously do feel like it is a superpower. So whatever.
We'll keep it.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you were at home then, what kind of things were you doing with friends in your teenage years growing up? What kind of stuff were you doing?
So this is quite interesting because I'm now going to bring in a whole nother dynamic to this because my mum grew us up Christian. So my mum at the time very much felt like faith was a really kind of foundational layer.
What's your cultural background?
Jamaican heritage, obviously African diaspora, but because of transatlantic enslavement, we don't know where in Africa, but Jamaican in the most proximity to understanding my heritage. Yeah. But very Christian. Yeah. And went to church all my life.
Yeah. Sunday best.
But then I'd go to like girls club on a Wednesday, Saturday club on a Saturday. So I was really in youth church, really in the church. So then that comes with its own complexities because even if you then want to be part of the community, it's the part of it that my mum would let me be a part of. So go to
and
girls'
you'd be looked at in a way from the rest of the community.
So you've got the church lens and their bias and their privilege and their understanding of what you're doing. You then got the community that you kind of want to be a part of, who are maybe not as aligned with church, shall we say. And then you've got where I'm being sent to be educated, and you're grappling with all these different spaces and places and wanting to find connection with all these different types of people. Yeah. And it's really, really interesting for me. And I look back now and I go, there was such a conditioning of my behavior and how to present myself. But also some of that comes from colonization. So when you've got grandparents who look at it like they came here in the Windrush to serve Queen and country, it was the idea for them of kind of disconnecting with what was home to them. And this was now home. Get in line, conform, speak the Queen's English, don't use patois, start to behave and conduct yourself as English people do, because that is success. So you're beginning to kind of almost lose all what made you
what you are, who you are, to fit in to somewhere that actually probably a lot of the way that this country looked from a distance is probably nothing like what it was when you got here, and how people then treated you no matter how you spoke.
Exactly,
and all
that.
The horrible stuff that come with that, which we will get onto.
Yeah, so all of those complexities, and even the church that we went to, interestingly, was more aligned with like BBC One Songs of Praise. It wasn't like a Pentecostal with the tambourines and the gospel choir. So for me, I'm like, I want a bit of that. I want to be there, be like, singing the songs and be like fully dancing down. And it wasn't like that. It was like the hymn book, and you're quiet and you say your verses, and you pray, and even that was a grapple, because it was like, are you a real Christian? Are you a white Christian or a black Christian? So there's even racial disparity in
your church. Was it mixed, as in there's white, black people?
It was, but even it was multicultural. It was more aligned with a certain type of behavior.
Right, and that behavior sounds like it's quite conservative.
Yes, yes. Sunday best, behave a particular way. You're not shouting and screaming and praising the Lord, hallelujah. It was very different. Yeah. So when I got to go and experience that, I might go visit a church, for example, or a convention. I'm like, I want that kind of Christianity. I want that kind of God. I want to connect with that. And it was like, no, this is you. This is how you behave. This is how you conduct. And so you're grappling with all these ideas of who you're supposed to be, but not because I've cultivated, I've inherited it.
Do you still see people through the church that you grew up with, or is that, you're still part of that?
Very rarely. So no, I don't attend that church anymore, but very, very rarely you might see the odd person in the supermarket or whatever, but they're a lot older now. So they would be like, because I was in youth church, so I'm 40 now, so they must be at least 60, 70. So they will remember me as a little girl, but the relationship is very different. So it's more like respect and honor than it is anything else. Okay. But it's very interesting dynamics.
Do you still now? Do you go to church?
Yeah, I will still go to church, but even that's changed now because of my journey of self-discovery around understanding transatlantic enslavement. So, when you understand how much Christianity was used to enslave, as much as I am a firm believer in God and I'm a believer in Jesus, the difficulty I have with it is how Christianity has been weaponized in a way in which to enslave. And that's really hard to grapple with your faith and that connection. And then, you have the church coming out saying, we now acknowledge our role in enslavement.
A lot of things.
Okay, so now what? So when you know that all of these things are happening, it's really hard to grapple with and still go into church and go, so I'm in this building and I know the history. I know what happened to my people. Yeah, and I'm sat there and I'm less focused on the word. And I'm more interested in assessing what's happening here.
You need to be an anthropologist. Like maybe, don't get me wrong, you do great stuff, but it sounds like you're interested in the kind of where this has all come from.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated. So then that led me actually to do my doctorate. So I'm doing my doctorate now, and I'm actually researching race, trauma, and education.
Wow.
And really looking at, are you hurting yourself more by knowing? Or is it better not to know? Because the more I
Ignorance
learn...
is bliss.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Is it? And that's what I'm trying to answer. Because the more I'm learning, the more I'm really questioning. Who am I?
You seem passionate about the learning and the exploring. And so maybe who knows? You're not at the end of that journey, are you?
4 years in.
But fair play to you. That sounds like a huge piece of work. But I mean, it sounds like something that would give you a lot of kind of
it's cathartic.
Yeah.
It's healing.
Yeah.
And I'm grappling with forgiveness of myself for what I didn't know. And, you know, I'm a mum. So I have 2 children. I have a son who's 17 and one who's 14. And I guess I cannot dictate their pathway, but I'm trying to make it less problematic than what mine was. And giving them much more sense of self for choices at their age. At their age, I had no clue about any of this. I'm learning it in my late 20s, 30s. They know it now. And so they're making much more informed choices about what it means to be a Black boy in 2025.
Well, that's, you know, that's the thing, isn't it? Like you could look at people that have been through lots of different situations. You know, you speak about trauma, it could be trauma, it could be whatever experiences growing up. And then it's that continuation over generations to be in a situation where, you know, you reflected on all that's gone on. Yeah. And you're actively, you're actively bloody educating yourself to support and educate others, which is obviously massive. But then that kind of whole, those values being passed down to your kids, this is where it changes, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's got to change somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure your parents and other people, and you could probably say that other people in history weren't necessarily feeling like they were doing wrong, even though we know that all of this was...
It's all perception and contextual to where you are in time. And I guess I'm just trying to do the best I can with the reality I have and the knowledge that I now know. So it's interesting times.
So the knowledge you now know. I mean, what happened? Just pinch my finger. What happened then from when being in teenage years, finishing school, your journey then to go into to work? How did we get to where we are now? Like, feel free.
I mean, that's an interesting one. But I mean, I definitely came from a generation where education was considered to be the passport. If you want to get out of quote unquote the ends, if you want to be in a position where you're doing something different, your education, your knowledge, your experience is going to be the passport. And so, you hear the stereotype of, lawyer, doctor, accountant. Which one are you choosing? At that time,
was it like that at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. You could not be in my mum's house and expect to just get by. What are you going to do with your life? Your grandparents made sacrifices to be here. Don't waste it. I
mean, you hear it, don't you, from lots of different immigrant families and backgrounds. And let's be honest, a lot of us from the same background, there was none of that. Yeah. This is just whatever, do we want to do? Do you know what I mean?
Which I always find so interesting.
And
because aspirations were so important. Yeah. Really important. And so for me, I chose law. So that was the one. So I did, my GCSEs, went and did my A-levels, did a law degree. Wow. And I ended up working for a law firm for a few years. And I pretty much was certain. I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to be a solicitor. That's what I'm going to do.
What was your hope from the law
I think
profession? What were you I bet you, I can just tell you were probably someone that was like, I want to do this.
I wanted to fix something. I wanted to go either into criminal or human rights law. That was the option. So that activism, that justice seeking was always there. Yeah. I lasted 5 minutes in criminal. Not for me. Why? I am a lightweight. It's not for me. I think whether you are working for the government in the sense of you are working for the Crown Prosecution Service and you're trying to convict somebody, or you are the person defending somebody, what I found difficult was it was about who was the best at arguing the point rather than always seeking truth. And that was really difficult for me because truth seeking is important in law, that kind of scale of justice. Yeah. But I began to realize how the system works.
But if you're better at questioning, and you're not following or looking for the truth, you're trying to hide the truth, then...
And I found that's moral compass was so difficult for me to grapple with. And I get that everybody deserves a defense, but then I'm going, but how can I? And then at the same time, I'm going, we need to prosecute, but what if I convict the wrong person? And that moral compass for me was too much of a weight. I couldn't do it. Lightweight, couldn't do it. So I said, all right then.
I don't think that's lightweight. I think that's having set values on what's right and wrong.
I struggled. And we got the chance to go to Crown Court and go and experience. And I sat in a few trials. I sat in some really difficult trials, like a murder trial, rape trial, a child abuse trial. And I was just like, no, I'm out. Tap me out. I'm out. I'm done. Wasn't for me. Bangles. But yeah, it wasn't for me. I couldn't do it. I said, this is not for me. You know, when you grow up, you watch TV and you kind of watch, like, I'm showing my age now, but like Annie McBeal. And I was like, oh, that's what it's going to be like to be a lawyer. No. It was nothing.
No, but most people get their interests and passions from watching and seeing stuff. And it comes into representation and stuff, right? Like, we do, don't we?
Yeah.
But then when you see the reality.
And I was like, this is not for me. So then I thought, okay, human rights is certainly something that could be of interest to me in a different way. So I was working at a particular law firm, and this is where my life changed. I said, I guess if you're looking for that seminal moment, this was the seminal moment. So we had to all go and do some kind of pro bono stuff. And I was working for the Prince's Trust at this point for my pro bono volunteer work. Okay. Yeah. And I was working on a project called the NOMS Project, which is the National Offender Management Scheme. Okay. And I was working with a group of young boys who had been convicted for various different crimes in different prisons in and around Bristol. And there was one particular young man that I had spent quite a lot of time with, and I kept going to see him. And on one of our sessions, he literally just stopped me in my tracks and said, oh, perhaps if you were my teacher, I wouldn't be in prison today. And I was like, huh? I was fully confused because I didn't get what he meant. I'm just trying to be the rich auntie. I'm thinking I'm going to be this international lawyer. I'm going to be living my best life. And here he comes and says something that I can't get out of my head. And so we continue, we finish the sessions and I move on. But I go back into my day job as a legal assistant at the time and I'm going, why am I here? What am I doing? Do I want to be in a pathway, a career where I am trying to get people out of what they're already in? Or can I stop them even getting there in the first place? And that's when I went, education might be the thing. Now, to contextualize that, my mum is a primary school teacher. Okay. So she already wanted me to come to the education side at some point. I was like, no,
she should have said that years ago.
You know,
she was saying law.
Do you know what I mean? But I'm like, no, you keep it. But at that point, that's when the transition began. So much to my grandparents' disappointment, after 7 years in law, it was I'm gonna shift. Yeah. And so I'm no longer going to be this kind of beacon of celebration in the community. You know, my granddaughter's this. I'm now something else. I'm starting again, back to zero. Yeah. Retraining, restudying, relearning, and trying to kind of work my way through. So I did kind of a lot of the old school stuff. So I did Prince's Trust for a stint as an employee, did Old School Connections. If you remember Connections, I did Connections. I
worked for Connections for a little bit. At the middle.
Mine was up in Kingswood and the centre that we had in City Centre back in the day. Yeah. And that was kind of like my youth work bit. You know, you do your youth work, you're a practitioner bit, you do all that sort of stuff. And then I went into some kind of education community work and then eventually ended up at City Academy and worked my way up and ended up being an assistant principal. And I was there shy of 10 years.
I love the way you just fire that across like that.
Yeah, that's just how we got there.
It's just like,
that's just how we got there. Yeah, it was just like that.
Well done.
But it was an interesting journey. And I think that justice work and commitment continued in that pathway. And I guess a few key seminal moments there was that I did the BBC documentary about the lack of Black teachers. That's when I really started to kind of grapple with education and representation.
So at City Academy, paint a bit of a picture. I know this is X amount of years ago. Like when you were there as a, you're a vice principal, what was the deal there with the amount of teachers that were there and maybe like roughly the percentage of people that were from similar backgrounds to most of the kids that are going to school?
Very, very few. So we're talking about a school that's majority racialized as Black, a split between African and Caribbean predominantly, some South Asian, but that was predominantly the mix. At my time of teaching there, the biggest population was Somali Muslim. And,
Any Somali teachers?
At that time?
Yeah.
No. Support workers?
Yeah.
But not teachers.
And did they feel like they could? I mean, I know it's hard for you to. How can you talk for other people? But I'm sure you would have had these conversations. Did people feel like the pathway was there, that it was possible for them to do the training to become a teacher.
I think people find it really problematic and very difficult. It's also quite expensive because you're talking about having a degree and then having a postgraduate degree. Yeah. You're talking about...
And he pays for everything whilst you're doing that. If you've got a family.
It's not an easy kind of transition to make. And when I did the BBC documentary was because we knew of all of the secondary schools that we had 26 Black teachers across 19 secondary schools in the city. Okay. And that's Black and Black mixed heritage.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you're looking at those sorts of numbers, that needed to be exposed, which is why we did the documentary for the BBC. And that really began to question, why is this? And it was multifaceted. Was there systemic racism in the process? Absolutely. Was there culture difference? Was there lack of financial support and funding? And some of the reasons were not just racialized, because teaching has its problems anyway. Even if you're a teacher racialized as white, being overworked, it being expensive.
People within the profession.
Yeah, retention. There was that. But then you had the complexity of the racialization and then the intersect of religion. You think about Muslim and the faith at that time, and trying to get people that looked like the community we were serving was really hard. And at that point, I was the only Black member of senior leadership. And so there was a real kind of grapple and journey. And so it wasn't enough for me to just do a documentary. Well, what more are you going to do now, Aisha? You've kind of poked the bear. Now what are you going to do? So then that led to me doing my TED talk about why representation is important. And then that led to me writing the book, How to Become an Anti-Racist Educator, essentially. And all of those three things led to me saying, I'm one person in one school. The ripple effect is limited. If I really want to do this, I'm going to have to step out on faith. And that was when I switched from being an assistant principal to founding the company Representation Matters, because I wanted to spread this knowledge and this information.
So has this been spread nationally. Now nationally?
Yeah, and internationally now. Yeah, we're doing bits. And right now we're 5 years old in July.
Okay, yeah.
And it's been a real journey. And education has always been the catalyst. And the hope has always been that Black children will never question their ability and who they are, not just in their education experience, but in lifelong opportunities. They were the reason this all started. Now, Representation Matters now is no longer just about race and education, but that is absolutely where it started.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've written down a load of questions and I bet you probably answered after them. Just whatever.
We're freestyling. That's okay.
Exactly. We'll go for it anyway. But I mean, the thing that comes out for me, so I've worked in different youth and community work, mostly education as well at different times. And it's like, it's one thing having representation, which is huge. Then the other thing is what's being taught. Because the curriculum, like, it's all well and good. You can have someone that mirrors how you look and maybe from a similar background, culture and all that kind of stuff. But then if what's being taught is just like so one-dimensional.
Yeah, and limited.
Then how does that help kind of, open up discussions that will connect with everyone in the room?
Exactly that. But also it's recognizing, even in this conversation, not just what's being taught to children who are racialized as Black and brown or racially minoritized. Yeah. What are you teaching children who are racialized as white that perpetuate this cycle?
When you look at class and you look at, I mean, this is a wide, it can ripple out wider, and it does. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Is that even recognized?
And it impacts us vastly. And if we just take one of the most difficult moments in my educational career is realizing that we're teaching children about transatlantic enslavement. We do it through the lens of British Empire. Now, I had no consciousness of this at the time.
You've got to learn from what's gone before to help shape what happens, but then it needs to be nuanced with...
Right, and how is it being taught? And how is it being understood? And when you are a child who is 14 years of age, you walk into your history lesson and you're now going to be introduced to a concept that you never understood. And all of a sudden you're going, that's my ancestors?
Yeah.
Is that where I come from? Is that what your people did to mine? And you're having this...
It's oppressed. It comes from an oppressive model. You constantly I can only imagine.
You just sat there going, but also what does that do for that white child? Because it is also going to give them an air of superiority that doesn't quite make sense, because you're going,
or it gives them guilt. Shame, exactly.
And all of these different emotions. And you're going, well, what does this mean for me? And how is that being handled and managed and understood? And then at the same time, you've got someone going, well, you're so privileged. And then you've got, a child who is racialized as white, for example, in South Bristol, they can't even feed and pay the electric bill, going, how are you telling me I'm privileged? And this is what, and then it becomes so nuanced because the privilege is not in finance, it's in positionality. But you can't see that. And then this is how you get the tension between the communities. That's not understanding what these things mean. These words being weaponized and utilized to control people's understanding. Most people are using this language, they don't even know what they're talking about. They don't understand fundamentally what's happening here.
What do you think then? And I'm going back a little bit, but at your time at school, what was, and how many years, just say this is 5-10 years ago, just say that around that kind of time. What was actually working well? Because I think there's a wider piece about this is representation and education, because of your experience within that world. What was working well in the education system at that point that you think, hats off, we could do more of this? And then we'll talk about maybe what wasn't working so well, which I'm sure is feeding into exactly what you're talking about.
Where I saw good practice, you kind of have to break it down into different areas. So where I could see what you need nothing more than anything else is good teachers and good teaching, regardless. It doesn't matter how you're racialized. So when you are seeing good quality teaching being received by children, regardless of the postcode that they are being educated in, that is always going to be paramount. So you do see good teaching. You're seeing children understand their core subjects, whether that's maths, whether that's science, whether that's English, whatever it is. And those children are getting what they need, the kind of the credentials, the passport.
Is that all of what they need though?
But that's my point. But we are preparing children to attain. We are helping them to progress, but through a particular lens.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a whole person? What is the full currency that you are putting in the back pocket of a child? So when they do leave the education system and the safety of their school setting, whether they go on to do A-levels or university, that they understand the complexity of the world that they're going into. And that changes geographically, regionally, nationally, globally. My experiences of being Black is very different depending on where I am in the world. And so when you begin to understand all of that, it doesn't matter if I came out with straight A's and, a 2-1 degree, it almost becomes irrelevant because people are also going to look at me and make decisions based on how much melanation they see in my skin. And if you are not prepared for that understanding of where the world sees you and therefore your experience of the world may be, that shock is really hard.
And do you feel like then, because this is just working with different people over the years within youth work at the Mill and various other things, it's always felt like, there's always discussions about that with people of colour about what you're going to face. And you must probably, some people get that at home as well. But was that something you were really strong on at school? But then there's not that many schools by the sounds of it that have people that represent other people that are Black.
No, and so some of that was missing. Some of that connection was missing, some of that understanding. And so people are finding out through incidents and things going wrong, rather than it being that kind of proactive approach and being able to question what's being taught, how it's being taught, that preparation, that connection, that healing that's needed for a child when they're trying to grapple with their identity and who they are and what this means.
Did you, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got a curriculum, you've been told you've got to do.
Yeah, so how do you do all this extra stuff?
It's an academy that they get, results driven, all the rest of it, this is such as life. How do you weave in the things that really matter? I'm widening this even more, but it comes under skills for life and understanding yourself. And that is so important. Because it's not just the young people that are going off and doing university A-levels, it's the other kids that is going to be stuck in that community that may not have a job. Yeah. That may not feel like they've got any opportunity to get a job. What do you feel like was there a way to try and prepare people, or is that part of what you do
I think
now?
There was a way, but it was how good it was being taught in different schools. But for me, I'm a massive advocate of enrichment and extracurricular, but also PSHE and citizenship. That was my area. That was my subject. That was what I was very interested in. Because that's when you are giving the children this extra knowledge and skill base that they can then weave into those core subjects, but also into life. That's where you need it. So when you've got good PSHE teaching.
It's an add-on for some, because I used to teach at different places. It's an add-on for some schools.
And some people it's really embedded.
It's the middle piece, isn't it?
It's the golden thread
to everything.
Exactly.
It should be.
And when that's done well, you've got good tutor time, good assemblies, you've got good enrichment, a strong PSHE and citizenship curriculum. I see the difference in the currency that those children leave school with in comparison to those that don't have it.
Well, an understanding of their identity and others around them,
It's
isn't it?
massive.
It's huge, yeah.
And so for me, there is a lack of focus on making that core. And I was really hoping that the government a few years ago would make it mandatory, but instead parts of it were mandatory. So sex and relationship education became mandatory, but not all of PSHE teaching. And so I feel the bits on identity and culture and connection just haven't had it. So this is where youth work's been so important. So going places like the Mill, but I would say in my generation growing up, being able to go, exactly.
Hugh Punter was
do you know what I mean? Or even people like Jendai, those people really helped in the community because they really did give us some of that knowledge, that supplementary education to help us begin to understand
this is the thing for me. Where do you get that knowledge from? If you don't have mum or dad that for whatever reasons, people behind you, those people were pillars.
Oh, absolutely.
Solid. And they absolutely lived and breathed that. Yeah. There's still great people out there, but it's just, there's not as many.
And it feels diluted.
Yeah, well, it has to be because there's not the centralised kind of, they all work, all the people you're talking about work for the council, obviously other people as well. They were full-time workers. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it's very difficult to have the same kind of impact if you're someone that does 2 nights, 3 sessions a week, or then you go up because you're running an organisation that you then end up having to spend your time away from the coalface. And then you're bringing in the funding and what have you for other people. Can you imagine if, Stuart with the BME team or whatever, it was like never in front of people. And he had to literally bring in all the funding and do all the meetings and all the other stuff. Yeah. His legacy wouldn't be anything like it was. Generally the same. And the list goes on.
People,
so it's the system.
Yeah.
Let me come on to this now. This, you might have answered it already, but I'm going to chuck it in there. How would you define then an inclusive education system? I know that's a massive question. But for you, how would that look?
In the most simplistic terms, it is genuinely being seen, being heard, and being included. Because the idea of inclusion has been really misunderstood. And people often equate it to actually somebody having SEN needs. They're not looking at inclusion in regards to somebody's cultural identity and what makes them who they are. Do I think you can have a system that meets every different protected characteristics and covers every single subject area? No, we don't have enough time for that. But what you can do is cultivate an environment that no matter who I am, I'm welcome. No matter who I am, you have a space for me to be seen and heard. And we think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That idea of feeling safe is about belonging, connection. And that is something we can cultivate irrespective of who an individual is. But I'm going to call bell hooks now, because then that goes back to love. And we get a bit funny about things like love. We can't talk to kids about love. We can't talk about why? Because if we could start
part of how most people feel and what they need and what they want.
Because if we can start with love, if I call Brené Brown, if we can start with empathy, what we are then doing is cultivating a connection which is almost unbreakable, regardless of what our differences are and what we're going through. But we've lost that in our core.
Why do you think that's been lost?
I think that's been lost because we have all been caught up in the system, the haves and the have-nots. We are moving at such a fast pace. We're not slowing down. We're not pausing. And it almost feels like we're living a microwave life. What happened, and there was something quite beautiful that COVID did for all the COVID years and all the difficulty. It caused us to stop.
Pause,
it caused us
reflect.
To pause. But it began to bring back that community. Oh, I'll do your shopping. Oh, I'll cook this week. We'll be in a bubble together. We'll share. And there was something quite beautiful about humanity that was happening in that moment. That doesn't happen anymore. And that's what I worry about. My kids have never grown up with that sense of community, not because I haven't wanted it, but it's not cultivated in the way it was for my grandparents' generation. They survived by connection. Your nurse is doing shifts and you're looking after that person's kids, that person's kids. You go to church together. You go to the community hall together. You did things that made you feel connected.
So is this, because there's something interesting, This is like right on my street in the sense of like, is it because years ago people maybe were moving to this country, or communities were less transient, all those kind of things, that people were together more?
Yeah.
There was more provisions that were there for young people to go to. People's life was slower, and they've been living together for longer. There's less, I suppose, gentrification. There's less movement. So you have that connection with people, but everyone's life is busy now, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've lost that village mentality, like that beauty of village and connection.
How do we get that back? Maybe a question that's a bit too big for this.
Yeah, it's a big question, but I think it has to be intentional, not incidental. COVID was an incidental moment that allowed us to reconnect. But if we want to keep that, we have to be intentional about it. And how do you genuinely cultivate that pause? How do you integrate that as part of your life? And it's even things like, I say to my kids, you're going to go and you're going to learn to cook, because I want them to go to my grandparents' house and learn how to kind of season chicken and how to cook a meal, because that's village connection. That's passing on the knowledge between great-grandparent and great-grandchild. It's not because I can't teach my kids how to cook, but it's something about that connection of the generations, the act and the embodiment of doing it together. That's priceless.
Well, I've heard it loads of times. You don't learn from your parents. Like as much as people kind of want to be your kids are less likely, my kids, whoever's kids are less likely to learn from mum, dad, whoever's around, just based on the fact that you're so close to them. So it is the other people, the trusted adults, the other people in the community, the other family members.
It's the village.
And if the village doesn't exist, there's loads of research on it. It's not just me piping up, which you know about. So if that doesn't exist, we're already we're
very dysfunctional without it.
Back foot. I suppose that kind of feeds into another one of the questions about what are the biggest barriers to inclusive kind of education and I suppose even just society as well.
From a very binary standpoint, as you alluded to earlier, the education is what the education is. So when you think about national curriculum, what we have to teach within a finite amount of hours, we think about GCSE A-level degree, it makes it very difficult to weave in the bits that people might say are extracurricular. They're nice to haves. So there is one aspect of it, and the government are currently looking at the curriculum and kind of reviewing the key components of what a child needs today. So there's that aspect of it. But I think on a community and interpersonal level, there is a responsibility that we have to own and take accountability for, and really go back to some of those ancestral principles that really navigated all of us to where we are today that we've lost sight of. But that has to be choice.
So if I said to you, and I've got no idea if this would ever be a thing, that if the education system allowed enough, not even regional, specific kind of space and time within a curriculum for each school to specifically work on that, what might be classed as additional enrichment, whatever it might be, work to happen with those young people, surely that's a way of kind of filtering in the things that matter in that community. Yeah, we could all argue about this, like different stuff that used to happen from a youth service and youth provisions and all the rest of it. But as we know, we can't guarantee that, because we can't guarantee that the lights are going to be on. Exactly. Do you know what I mean? The only statutory thing we can guarantee is to school, unless they pull the finger out and suddenly start, building up, the money for youth provisions to continue. And maybe that is the role that they play, but we can't guarantee that.
And the thing is, you do see it, and I know people have their opinions on this, so it is very divided, but we work with state schools, we work with private schools. I see it in the private schools all the time. Now, I get it, they've got more money and more resource, arguably.
What do you see?
I see intentional space for the cultivation of understanding, belonging, connection, inclusion, that extra currency that we're talking about that a child needs. And you see it. You genuinely see what it means to pour into a child and have more time to do this with them.
So why is it that in a private school, they are allowed, I shouldn't say they, but I just said it. they are allowed to chop and change whatever that curriculum might be to suit the needs of their learners, young people, however you want to call it. And other institutions that are,
But now we're talking about a whole different conversation now, because when you think about that, they're regulated differently. The education system's regulated differently. They don't respond to Ofsted. They don't have to. It's a different body. The way in which the curriculum design is different.
If it's seen as, we are going off on one, but so what? I mean, if it's seen, listen, if people with the most financial clout in this country that are sending their kids to private schools that have seen a way that's the best, they feel like it's the best way to educate their children. Yes, we know that it would change depending on the area and the communities and the backgrounds. Why can't we, as in people from everyday communities, why isn't the national curriculum echoing? Oh, the lights have gone out. So the lights are out, the floodlights have gone down, but we're still here.
We're still here.
We're ploughing ahead.
We are.
So, as I was saying,
yeah.
Why can't state schools echo what has worked well in private schools if we know that having that additional enrichment time, having more space and time within the curriculum to support with that wider learning and knowledge, which we know is so valuable? I mean,
the most crude answer is finance and resource. That's what it comes back down to. Finance, resource.
What, to deliver the sessions?
Because fundamentally, state schools have, and they might argue that this is not the case, but from my perspective, from my experience, they have much more money and resource to do some of these things. Teachers,
they have more money?
More money and resource. Private schools have more money and resource to do some of these things. Sorry,
hang on.
Get that right. Private schools have more money and resource to do these things.
Yeah.
Whereas I think state schools have a finite amount of resource, and it's difficult. And they do like, some schools are really doing a good job. But then there are schools who I've met where they're struggling with books and pens and pencils. It's really hard. They can't afford to bring in guest speakers. They can't afford to get, people to come in and run sessions and do workshops. They're relying on goodwill and what's available. And amazing things happen in London. Might not get that in Bristol or in Swindon or in, Cheltenham. It's difficult because resources are also dispersed differently. And I do think whether you're in a grammar school, a state school, a private school, or even, a church school, they are all doing the best they can do to really enhance the quality of experience for their children. But it is all going to come back to resource. And it's hard. So I don't want to blame one and say it's their fault or, the haves and the have-nots. I think the government structure and how income is distributed is what it is. Neither you or I can change that. But I guess what we do as an organisation, and certainly what I see the schools do that we are working with, is they are finding ways to embed and weave this in with the resources that they have. And so going back to curriculum, reviewing it, seeing the opportunities of enhancement of what's already there, it is happening. It's just a bit of a slower process for some.
I guess as well, I think in the past, I know that I've been delivering enrichment programs in the past at Merchants Academy way back when. And so I know you can tell that people that have probably had those experiences were trying to bring it in Wednesday afternoons, those certain kind of a variety of different things that you've got a menu of and you choose them. So I know people have tried to do it, but what I mean is it's like, why can't the government...
I don't have your answer.
No.
I'm sorry.
No. And it's not for me to expect you to have the answer. But, it feels like it's something that's been mentioned a lot anyway. Not by us, but by, or probably by us, by a lot of other people. Yeah. I guess so. With the work that you're doing, it sounds like it's across the country. It's in schools. Maybe explain a little bit more about that, because I haven't really given you a chance to kind of say a bit more about that.
We do quite a variety of things. So from a leadership perspective, we do a lot of kind of coaching and consultancy for leadership teams about inclusive practice. We don't focus on one particular lens. So whilst race is my specialism, in the team, people cover different topics. So some may look at LGBTQ+, some will look at neurodiversity, some may well be looking at, if you've got a current topic, masculinity and sex sexism and misogyny. There's so different members of the team do different things. So we kind of provide that kind of level of consultancy. We also provide kind of CPD for staff. So we do kind of workshops and kind of inset day training and those sorts of things. But actually what we do for children that we really enjoy is whether it's tutor time sessions, assemblies or workshops, is actually giving them the tools and resources to really explore what they need, but also for them to kind of bridge that gap of intergenerational difference and them actually being as much of a resource to us as we are to them, and really explaining this is what it is to be a young person in 2025. This is what it is to be a child. Please include this in your resource and your training when you go to other schools, because there is a resource that's being misunderstood because we often deliver from our positionality, and yet we're preparing them for a future that they will be in. And so there is,
which could be different,
right? So it's really important. So we enjoy doing like our workshops and our assemblies and our sessions because it means that we really get to connect and keep ourselves connected with the voice that we think is the voice of the future.
Yeah, no, it sounds like really powerful stuff, and it sounds like you're known far and wide to get that work elsewhere. So it's not like we need to promote it.
No, we've been very, very fortunate, very blessed. And, we do work in Bristol, but I mean, most of our work is out of the city and it's great, whether we're working with the diocese, if we're working with, private schools or state schools, we are adapting our good practice to whatever school we're in. So we're less worried about the type of school. Actually, how can we bring this to you? And what does this look like, sound like? And we share that best practice. And if it means that children and staff are getting that, then that's great.
No, it is great. I guess then another question that I'd like to ask is because you're working far and wide in different communities, cities, areas, do you think there's something, maybe say about things that you feel like have worked, but policy-wise, within like the education system, however you want to answer this really, is there things that have worked in the past that you think have helped with representation? Or do you have ideas of things that actually could change at a higher level that really could make a difference?
Yeah, I think the things that have helped is having legislation and guidance that you can pin the work on, because you often get the whataboutery. Oh yeah, but why are you doing that? And what about this? And what about that? And knowing that you can call upon the Equalities Act 2010, for example, you've got the clear 9 protected characteristics and we have a public sector duty and we have to foster good relations between all of these groups of people in our settings. So there is almost a mandate. You have a duty to do this. Schools have to have equality objectives.
You can call people out, can't you, because of it.
Accountability and responsibility. Yeah. So that's good. When we think about things like keeping children safe in education, when we think about the new legislation around PSHE in terms of like sex and relationships, we now have avenues in which to do this work. So from that perspective, it gives us a conduit for change. And that's a really, really good place to be in. If you compare it to across the pond, and whilst I'm not trying to comment on the president's administrative activities and decisions, when you don't have the government giving you a mandate for the work you want to do, it makes the work very problematic. We in the UK still have the support of the government to do this work. So on the one hand, we have those channels. Where it can become problematic is when you have different ministerial decisions and opinions. So we take, for example, Kemi Badenoch, who's, obviously when the Conservatives were in power, spoke very publicly about the impartiality guidance of 2022. And it left teachers really questioning, well, what am I allowed to talk about in schools? And will I be unlawful if I do this? And will that be problematic? And can I personally be responsible for those behaviors? That's been problematic. If you take things like the prevent agenda, and then teachers know that they're personally responsible if they don't refer something on. So that almost surveillance of children and families and communities, is that the role of a teacher? There's safeguarding and then there's surveillance.
Isn't that what should be happening
as
elsewhere?
A teacher? Should I be doing that? And is that my responsibility? And where is that line? And then we saw over policing, for example, of Muslim communities, but less vigilance around children who are being groomed to become aligned with the far right. And so when you think about the positives and the negatives, the same piece of legislation can be a real catalyst for change, but also be a real barrier. And it's all about positionality and understanding of the policy and how you utilize it.
I mean, that that leads me on to just, and I don't think this is going to be a particularly easy answer maybe, but on that note, what skills do you think teachers and students could develop to create a more inclusive future? Is there things that you're teaching now specifically that you think are like, I know you can't go into loads of detail, but there's just like the broad brushstrokes.
I mean, we're very fortunate that we actually support a number of teacher training programs. So we are actually talking to up and coming trainee teachers. It has to start there. You might as well start at the beginning and start sowing the right seeds rather than trying to correct knowledge or lack of knowledge or awareness gaps once they're into their career. It's really hard. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really hard to speak to a teacher who's 25 years into their teaching career and saying, have you considered? It's like there's a whole intellectual tantrum going on around what I've been taught, but also generational difference. When you've got younger people coming in, so whether it's younger in career, I mean not necessarily age, but I mean younger in terms of their career and what they're being taught now, you can sow the right seeds to core beliefs, principles, values. You embed that in day one. So I did a bit of a program for the University West of England, and they designed a whole component for their trainee teachers. That meant they were looking at all of these lenses as part of their training practice from day one. So you've got a set of teachers going into their careers already thinking about perception, understanding, already holding the mirror, questioning core beliefs and values, and seeing where those unconscious biases or even conscious biases are showing up in their teaching materials, but interpersonally with the children in front of them. You get that right from day one, you haven't got anything to correct. It's teaching them critical thinking. And there was not enough of that. Whereas I feel now there is a real shift. How are we preparing future teachers, future doctors, future lawyers, future police service people with the right seeds of knowledge to bridge that lack of awareness of each other's cultures and communities from day one?
This, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. And I'm going to ask you this question, but I feel like I'm kind of giving it's like the answer. But I mean, is there another way as well? Because obviously those young people, those children, they go out into society, they go out into the world, and the world doesn't necessarily have those same experiences at school. Is there a way for, how can parents and communities and wider society contribute to a more inclusive future? Like, does it start from education? That's where my head was at. I think it does, point, isn't it?
But I think one of the things that I talk about on our training sessions when we deliver out in community is we use the analogy. We say, if you have a house and you own it, you might want to know its value. If you have a piece of jewelry, you might appraise it. If you have a car, you might MOT it. Sure. But I guess the key question is, when was the last time you did a cultural MOT? So if I said, Ben, really question, what areas do you go to? What music do you listen to? What books do you read? Who makes you flinch? Who makes you excited? Those are all clues to your positionality and how you see the world. Just take a pause. All of us can do that. All of us can stop, do a bit of an audit, and just check what that does to our behaviors and our attitudes in any lens, whether that's gender, race, sexuality, whatever. But if we just pause and just check, we get so much information that we already have about what we know and don't know.
This fits into the bias, the unconscious bias.
Absolutely. But if you don't ever pause, how will you ever know? You don't need to go back to school to do that. You could do that today. Yeah.
Wow. I think I need to pause. I mean, not on that note. I think I paused enough. But I think we all need to pause a little bit.
Yeah.
Look, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's been amazing. And I've been really interested myself to hear about your experiences and the stuff that you've done and what you're working towards. And you're right. That's a brilliant way to end the podcast for me anyway. It feels like the fact that we can all own this a little bit by pausing and thinking about, everything you've just said then. And we're all part of that change, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And if we don't play that role, it comes back down to the kind of the village and all the rest of it, then, there's not going to be floods of money. It comes down to all these services that suddenly makes this utopia happen.
No.
That's not going to happen. So we have to. And maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah. The ripple effect. Yeah. Imagine what all of us could do if we just stopped and paused.
Yeah. On that note, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
Do you know an electrician that's sort of like... No, The podcast is called What Really Matters.
Yeah.
And if I said to you now, what really matters to you, what is the first thing that comes into your head? It could be professionally, it could be personally. Don't take it in too much. What really matters to you?
The art of listening. I think we've lost the art of listening. We're always listening to respond. I think we just need to listen to listen. We'd learn so much more about each other if we could just pause, connect, and be open to understanding.
Perfect. Thank you, Aisha.
Thanks for having me.
What a lovely way to finish it.